Hello and good evening. Today we have three speakers. We have Martina Kraus. Hello.
Hello.
We have Alexander Thalhammer, also known as LXT. Hi.
Hi, hello.
And we have Rainer Hahnekamp, who will join in some minutes. But anyway, we will start with Martina, who has a really awesome talk about security. So, Martina, stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. And I'm really happy to be able to speak here. It's basically my first time. And with a brand new topic and a brand new hype, basically. I'm pretty sure every one of you heard already about Passkeys, the benefits maybe, and maybe you already used them. I want to show you today why you should finally say bye-bye to passwords and how you can actually leverage your application with Passkeys. So we start with the questions, why are passwords actually so bad? And I'm pretty sure you know a couple of those reasons already, but I want to convince you even more why passwords are not that convenient and safe as you might think about. The first, of course, is phishing. Phishing websites can easily harvest passwords from even the most tech-savvy. Also, there are so many tools that can easily remote attack your websites with the login form, playing just remote replay attacks. You can just Google them. There are so many tools to just can automatically replaying them the whole night through, and maybe the next day with some brute force or dictionary attack, your password might be cracked. And of course, you hear it every day, data breaches. A lot of issues with password occurs when some database was actually leaked. And then it gets really worse when even the passwords are not hashed with a cryptographic hashing algorithm, but just maybe stored in clear text as they were entered. Many users, and to be fair, this is more of a human failure thing, but many users share and reuse their passwords. This is convenient because we have so many services and so many passwords we need to remember for sure. So we tend to reuse passwords. But of course, what happens if one password is actually discovered by a hacker throughout a data breach maybe, then the hacker can easily try to log in with this password and your account in all the other services. And well, most of the times it actually fits since we tend to share and reuse our password. One of the points also is that passwords are knowledge-based. That means we need to remember the passwords. Of course, we have our password manager, we have KeePass, LastPass, OnePass. They're all great, even though some password managers also have already some security issues. But even if we use password managers, we need to remember at least one password, right? And sometimes we also create multiple databases since we want to maybe have a database for our working passwords and a database for our private accounts, which makes sense to separate both. But in the end, then we need to remember already two passwords again. And everything that is knowledge-based and depends on us can be attacked throughout social engineering. For instance, when I was 14 and the internet raised up and I needed to create some accounts, I used as a password so many times the name of my first cat. And maybe the accounts still exist. I hope not. I deleted them all, but if there's still some stored somewhere, you can even find my account with this password somewhere. So it can easily be attacked throughout social engineering. Last but not least, we need to implement a really huge password management. If we forget our password, we need to have a reset and recovery flow. Of course, we like to implement and add multi-factor authentication. And this is so much effort to actually implement them with password managers and so on. If you're still not convinced, I would like to give you some stats about passwords. These stats are from the official FIDO Alliance. You can see some more stats on the URL I have linked on the left bottom. And actually, as you can see, 81% hacking related breaches are caused by weak or stolen passwords. And weak passwords, you can Google that easily, what is considered a weak password if you're not really using 12 letters and character variety and so on. But not only the problem is that we maybe choose weak passwords. As already mentioned, it could be also due to a weak algorithm. And tools like John the Ripper it can easily break this algorithm and knows what kind of hash function was used for which hash-based password, basically. Even more than 50% of consumers also have noticed phishing messages become more sophisticated. And nowadays, with even AI, it's so much easier to trick users into clicking something on the email because they crawl the whole website, they save some data and store some data about you, and they can even create more personal and more trustfully emails and messages and send it to you, and then basically try to try to phish your passwords, of course. So what if I tell you there could be a world without passwords? Wouldn't this be great? And this is exactly what I want to talk about today. But first of all, let me introduce me a little bit further. I'm Martina. I'm the only one today who is not from Austria, as you might have heard from my accent. I'm from Germany, basically the south of Germany, and I work as a consultant, trainer, and speaker. Right now, I'm working as the application security engineer by a company in Norway. And for that, I focused myself in Angular since I started my career as an Angular developer. For that, because I love talking and helping the community and consulting all of them, I'm being honored with a Google Developer Expert in Angular. That means I have a direct contact to the Angular team, and Google sends me some swag from time to time to promote, of course, Angular even further. And it's fine for me because I love Angular, and Angular is a great framework. I'm also OWASP team member. Maybe you have heard from OWASP already, Open World Application Security Project. They do some great stuff and great things and great resources when it comes all things about security. They also offer some great cheat sheets to protect yourself from cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery attacks, you name it, and so on. So make sure maybe you have heard of that and maybe visit the website as well. At any time, if you have a question, even after the Q&A afterwards, you can just ping a message, even on X, Blue Sky, you name it, with this handle on the bottom, or via email. I also tend to answer emails without sending an invoice directly afterwards. If you are more interested into Angular, I'm also a core orga of the biggest Angular conference in Germany. And it's the only one in Germany as well, but that makes it also the biggest, NGDE. And some of the speakers today are also giving a workshop there and some talks as well. So make sure to check that out if you're interested in learning more about Angular. But enough for me. Let's see Passkeys in action. And for that, I visited the website. And I hope now it works because I overdid a little bit the demo to make sure that it works. So let's see, I hope it works. So we have here on the right a passkey demo, which is from passkeys.io, which is a cool website to start, to just dig in what passkeys are and how we can log in with it. So first of all, I like to register myself with an email address. Basically, I do not necessarily have to give in my email address, but there are passkeys implementation where you can store your user ID or your email together with a passkey. And this is one of them. So I enter my email address and then I say, okay, no account exists. Okay, I want to create one. Yes, I want to register myself. And now I got asked to create a passkey. So let's create a passkey. And what we see here now, do you see my screen? I'm a little bit confused right now.
Yeah, we
Do
see
you
it. So
see?
we see the slides. Is this fine?
No, one second. I just recognized that this is not the correct one, because actually you should see my entire screen, which is that one. I don't know what, I'm not 100% sure why it didn't switch. Let me
Now we
just
have it.
check that. Now we have it.
Now we
I'm so
have it.
sorry. I just showed, maybe I shared the wrong thing. I'm really, really sorry. But what you see right now here, I clicked on create a passkey, and now we see a couple of options. Because when you create a passkey, you need an authenticator. So with an authenticator is meant an iCloud keychain or maybe an Microsoft keychain. It doesn't have to be necessarily from Apple. SM, this number SM is my smartphone. It's an Android phone which is linked to my computer. I can even use a so-called hard-bound passkey. That means the passkey can be stored on a USB stick or even like on a YubiKey. But I can also use a different phone or tablet or whatnot. Or I could store this passkey now inside my Chrome profile. I would not like that. So I, in that case, would like to store it in the iCloud chain. It could be now that I get an error because it's been too long where I actually try to create a passkey. And if it's that way, then I would just create it faster in the next round. So now Apple asked me to actually open the iCloud keychain with a credential. And this could be a PIN, or this could be facial recognition, or this could be now my fingerprint. And I use the fingerprint now. And now the passkey tries to create, but it was too slow because I explained a lot of things in between. So let's try that again a little bit faster. And now it should work. Now my passkey is successfully created. There was just a timeout because it took too long for the website for me to create a passkey, and that's why I created it now faster. Okay, perfect. So this is like what the passkey looks like. I can delete it. I could create another passkey with another device, maybe my smartphone now, maybe something that is not my iCloud basically. Okay, cool. So I could just sign out. And now if I click sign up with passkey, I have actually already 2 accounts linked to this website. So a passkey is always like a username with the domain and of course the authenticator. And for both accounts, I used my iCloud keychain. So let's try this one. And now again, my authenticator is called and asked, hey, please provide a passkey, and I can give access throughout a fingerprint. And my fingerprint works. And now I'm logged in again. Perfectly. So first I registered myself with a passkey, and now I logged in with passkey. Even though it feels like I logged in with my fingerprint, it's not like that. With the fingerprint, I just opened and gave access to my authenticator. But let's take one step back and watch together how actually passkeys are working and why this is considered so secure. When it comes to passkeys, we hear often a lot of different kind of terms like FIDO2, FIDO, passkeys. We even maybe heard already something about WebAuthn. What are these terms and how are they relating to each other? So let's start with FIDO. FIDO means Fast Identity Online and is a set of technology standards aimed at reducing the reliance on passwords to authenticate users on the internet. And well, the primary goal of FIDO is to enhance the security and usability of authentication process. The initiative behind all that is called FIDO Alliance. And it's a consortium that includes major tech companies like Apple, Microsoft, and Google, and of course, others who invested in improving online security. So this is what FIDO Alliance is. Let's take a step deeper into FIDO. As already mentioned, FIDO is an acronym of Fast Identity Online. It creates a lot of standards that focusing on providing stronger authentication methods, basically to solve the password problem, which leads to a resistance to phishing attacks and other forms of identity theft. And basically, FIDO is just a set of authentication standards, often refers to FIDO authentication. So FIDO Alliance is the whole consortium, and FIDO authentication is just a set of authentication standards without actually using passwords. These are basically, as the current state, 3 standards. We have FIDO Universal Second Factor. This standard supports hardware-based second factor authentication devices. That said, it means that we can use an USB device and plug it into our computer, and then maybe this USB also has a touch thingy thing that creates a key, and then we can just log in wherever we have this USB connected to our computer. The second standard is called Universal Authentication Framework, and it enables online services to offer passwordless and multi-factor security. So with UAF, the user registers the devices with an online service by providing a biometric like my fingerprint or the facial recognition, a PIN, or even a voice print. Once registered, the user can authenticate by simply repeating this action, like using the finger to have the fingerprint or to scanning the face and so on. And last but not least, and the most important for us today, FIDO2. FIDO2 is the latest set of specification that includes the so-called Client to Authenticator Protocol, CTAP. The web and, of course, the WebAuthn. So basically, the WebAuthn specification defines how web-based relying parties can interact with passkeys in a browser, while CTAP allows the implementation of cross-device authentication. For example, it enables the communication between a client and an external authenticator like my smartphone device. And FIDO2 is basically now the standard that brings passkeys with us, and it's often also called FIDO2 WebAuthn. So what is all about passkeys? So passkeys are so-called discoverable. That means the credential contains information about the user, like a user ID, and therefore enables the authentication flow that does not require to give in any kind of information like email or username. Even though I did type in my email address right now, but it is not necessary. It's just an additional information from this website, but it wasn't necessary. It can completely be without entering any kind of user information. And the user basically can just click on a button and then presenting the passkey by unlocking the authenticator. It uses WebAuthn. I'm pretty sure you heard already a lot of this. It's for the most part a JavaScript browser API that enables websites to create and use WebAuthn credentials. And this API basically can access our authenticator. It, like all of the new awesome web APIs, it has access to basically call the authentication now from the web browser and to access then this so-called passkey. And last, credential. Credentials in the WebAuthn context are cryptographic private keys, which involves a pair of mathematically linked keys. And Don't worry, I will not dig too much into cryptographic procedures right now, but it's important to know a bit, just a little bit of public-private keys to basically understand why passkeys are so secure. But don't worry, I will just explain it really step by step. As you might know, we have a private key, other way around, we have a public key, which can be shared globally. We upload our public key to GitHub that we can use as SSH for uploading pushing our code to the repository. And for that, we store the relating private key on our own. So we can just use this private public key pair to push our code securely to the repository. For passkeys, we make actually advantage of another feature of this public-private key pair. If we want to have a secret message and we want to send it someone, and the receiver of this message needs to somehow verify that this message definitely came from the person, and I want to verify that, I can sign this message with a private key. The signing process actually means that I hash the message and I use a cryptographic algorithm and together with the private key and then attach it to the message. So the message now has a signature, which includes the checksum, a hash-based algorithm of the message itself, and then an algorithm that encrypts this checksum together with the key. And the cool thing is now that only and really only the public key related to this private key can verify the signature. And so we can really be sure that this public key, that this message came from the person. We actually are sure that this person had this private key. And keep that in mind, because exactly this procedure we use for authentication with passkeys. For each private key, there exists a matching public key that resides on the server and will be used to check signatures created with the private key. So basically, throughout the whole process of registration, we create a public-private key pair and give the public key to a server. And the private key we keep in our authenticator. That means we have maybe thousands and over thousands of passkeys in our authenticator, like for each service and for each account. But it doesn't matter, it doesn't harm us, since we do not have to access them like we need to access our password through the password manager, which makes them already really secure, basically. So let's take a look into how we can create now a passkey and how we authenticate with a passkey. So when it comes to creating a passkey, we have 4 different kind of components components which needs to be interactive in this procedure. Of course, we have the user, which wants to register on a website. We have our client, which could be an Angular application or whatnot. We have a server, which should be hopefully most likely an identity provider like Azure ID or even Amazon Identity or Auth0, of course. And the last of the chain, we have authenticator. Our authenticator, which could be the iCloud keychain, our smartphone device, or even hard-bounded like a YubiKey. So what happens? The user clicks on the register button. The client asks the server to create a challenge. This challenge is nothing really special. It's just a random unique number or unique value that should be cryptographically unique. So you need to use a cryptographic random number generator for that, but it's just a random thing, basically. It's not really 100% important what stands inside of this challenge. But now comes the important part. We get the challenge back as a client, and now we call the WebAuthn API with the create function, basically, and ask our authenticator to create now, please, a passkey. And This request to the authenticator leads to the point where we should open and give access to our authenticator to create the thing, to create this thing basically, throughout biometric or what I did with the fingerprint. And if the authenticator has access, it then creates a key pair, public and private key, and the private key signs the challenge. Because I overgive the challenge also to an authenticator, the challenge that was previously generated by the server. So we have three parts that are generated by the authenticator. We have our public and private key pair, and we have a challenge that is signed with the private key. And we remember this challenge, signed challenge now can be verified with the public key. So what happens now is that we send the public key and the signed challenge back to the client. And the client gives this signed challenge and the public key to the server. The server verifies the challenge with the given public key and is sure, of course, that just if the private key who was signing this challenge signed the challenge can be validated throughout this public key. And if the signature is valid, then the passkey is successfully created. And this whole thing happens just if you use your fingerprint for registering yourself, basically. Authenticating with a passkey now looks basically similar. We generate again a challenge on the server. Basically, first of all, the server checks basically the client checks, not the server, sorry, basically the client checks the authenticator if there is already a passkey I can use. And if there is a passkey, then I ask the server again for a challenge. I again give access to the authenticator, the permission that now the authenticator can use the private key again to sign this challenge. And now the signed challenge is going back to the client and the whole verifying process is again taking place. The most important thing here is that the private key never, ever, ever leaves the device. And this is also one big difference between passkeys and passwords. We have the passwords for sure. We store them in a password manager, but we also give the password to our application, and we can't control at all how the application is basically storing our passwords, right? So we give a lot of control away. But here we just store the public key, we just give away the public key, and the public key, no one can ever do anything with the public key, really harmfully. So as long as we have the control of our private key and we know exactly where it stores and how it works, there's no really issue about being able to hack into our account or stealing our identity. So time is short, of course, but I really like to show you there is a cool application where you also can actually, the link for this application, for this repo you'll find in my slides. But there's a really cool application and a lot of resources and basically a lot of client and server libraries, which awesome people of the community already implemented to help implementing you for storing and using passkeys. But to be frankly speaking, the most easiest way would be to just use an identity provider. For example, in Auth0, a really famous identity provider I use a lot, there's just a check button to enable passkeys. And then you can just use passkeys in your Angular application, which is connected to your identity provider. So let's come back again to the beginning where we had a lot of attacks against passwords and how passkeys can rescue you from stealing that your identity could be stolen. So passkeys are phishing resistant since they rely on public key cryptography and are bound to the website's domain, the name, and making it impossible to work on a spoofed website. So there's no possibility for phishing attacks actually anymore. So with Passkeys, there is no remote replay attack at all possible anymore, since Passkeys rely on physical keys like platform authenticators with biometrics or roaming authenticators like YubiKeys. So even if you use an automatic tool to log in, you would need the private key for that. So this is impossible for remote replay attacks, basically. Data breaches, we also don't care, because when someone leaks the public keys, so what? Because they have the public keys, and I can give I would not, okay, it should not be so shared public key, but I can give my public key to anyone, but the person can't do anything. So hackers, so servers basically are really less attractive to hackers, since there's nothing to get there anymore, right? Because it's just public keys and not passwords. And most of all, I don't give the control away to an application. And I can assure you, I'm working as an application security engineer for already a couple of time, and there are still so many services and applications which are storing the passwords without hashing them before. And if they hash them, they may be using a really weak cryptographic hashing algorithm. So it's better that we have the control of our identity and not giving away this control. Passkeys cannot be reused and shared, since they are completely unique per service and user combination. I need to take one step back, because Apple, of course it's Apple, lets you airdrop a passkey. So on Apple there is a way to share passkeys, but I highly recommend not doing this. Use one passkey. I mean, the specification forces you either ways, but use one passkey for one account and one website. Passkeys are discoverable by the web browser, and the browser can even autofill them. We maybe saw that shortly here, that even like when I sign out, we see that I have already 2 passkeys over here, and the browser can even autofill them and tell, okay, I want to use this account with my passkey or this account. But this is depending on how you implement it with your identity provider. It doesn't necessarily needs to be offered, but it's up to you basically. So you can even autofill them. That said, you don't need to remember anything at all. And that said, less social engineering attacks for you. Passkeys are way easier to maintain, since passkeys are backed up by the platform you're using and are recoverable by default. And this making it unnecessary for the application to implement any kind of recovery flow. Even though, especially when it comes to recovery flow, there are some challenges, which brings me to the last point of today, since I really want to be fully transparent for you about the challenges with passkeys. Of course, when we're using passkeys, we relying so we are related to the OS and browser to implement the specs. And if you're a little bit familiar with OAuth or OpenID Connect, you know that even the client SDKs or even the identity providers are not really implementing the specs in the same way. And in fact, Android is doing it a little bit differently than Apple and Google and so on. So the support right now of passkeys is not completely uniform. The support is great, which let's shortly dig into that. You can use passkeys like in the web browser, like in every single cool web browser, basically you can use passkeys already. And because the WebAuthn API is also already supported and everything is fine. But of course, it's not completely unified throughout the whole OS and application software, basically. Third, we need to rely on cloud vendors like Apple, Google, and Microsoft. So basically, I stored my private key now in the iCloud. And yes, this could be critical, especially it could be critical when I'm in a company which are not allowing me to use Apple gadgets or some Apple software. Of course, I could be also in a company which is not allowed to use Google at all, which are blocking everything. So this could be a challenge when we want to implement passkeys and offering different kind of authenticators. Which brings me also to the last point. If we want to use hardware-bound passkeys like a YubiKey or USB gadget, then it could be critical when we lose this USB, because there's no really default recovery flow for hardware-bound passkeys. Remember hardware-bound passkeys, I mean like being on a smartphone device or like a YubiKey or USB, and cloud-based or roaming authenticator or more like cloud storage or whatnot. So there's no really default recovery flow yet specified. It will be definitely the future. But nevertheless, these challenges will be solved in the future. And of course, right now, there's a lot of rivals going on between the vendors of Apple, Google, and Microsoft. And there are already some voices telling, oh, the passkey hype is already over and Apple completely destroyed it because of it's Apple and telling a lot of things. I mean, Apple is destroying PWA as well, hopefully not too early in the future. But actually, they're already, like when you see proposals and what's going on in the world, then you can see definitely the direction of that this whole support and the whole vendor support will be unified, because of course right now it's one of the first specifications, but soon or later we will have a full unified support of passkeys. And with that, I just want to thank you for listening to me, for joining me in this evening. I overdid a little bit. I'm sorry, I just had 30 minutes, but I run a little bit over time. But I hope I was able to give you some great insights of passkeys and why you maybe should consider using them, at least offering it as an alternative to password-based authentication. So if you have any kind of questions, you can ask them now, or you can just ping me anytime afterwards with my email, or just send me a Twitter DM. So thank you again so much.
Awesome. So big thanks for this awesome presentation. I really liked it. I really liked the outlook to get rid of all my passwords.
Yes,
so
you should.
Currently, we don't have any questions here, so take your chance. If you have any questions to Martina, then put them now into the chat. Perhaps in the meanwhile, I have a question to bridge this. You told us that perhaps there might be the possibility to recover a passkey. So how could this work technically? Have you any idea which ideas they have?
So basically, like when you do not use hardware-bound passkeys, the passkeys are backed up by your system on default. So if your OS or whatnot is crashing, and you recover your OS, then basically the private key can be, like the passkey can be restored. So when it comes to a hardware-bound passkey, then of course it's way trickier. And as mentioned, it's not really a solution for that now. I guess right now the vendors and the people come with different kind of solution. I know from one company they actually like offering manually recovery, like it's like you need to send an email and maybe a phone call to identifying yourself again. basically with an email address and so on and so forth, and then maybe you have to enter a PIN and whatnot. So this is like more effort procedure than in the end, but it's just for the hardware-bound passkeys, because there's no, I mean, if you lose the one key that actually leads to the authenticator, then it's really hard to recover. What also will be done is, for example, when you have Google Authenticator on your smartphone and you lose your smartphone, there's one number, it's a recovery number, or what, either master recovery number or what it's called, that when you use all the authentication codes, there's at least one master PIN where you always can be able to recover everything. This is also something that will be used with passkeys to recover them, that you will get a master key basically, which you can still use even though if you lose your password, if you lose your passkey. Sorry, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, cool. Yeah, there is a similar question in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody can access my iCloud, will he, she also have access to all my passkeys too?
I mean, the simple answer is yes, but it's the same if you store passwords in the cloud. If someone cracks into your account and then gets all your passwords, if you have your password manager and you connect it to a Google Drive and leave your database over there because you want to use your database on different kind of accounts to share them, then yes, and someone cracks into this account, then of course it could be. And that's why I even encourage even more to maybe not using, even I did it right now, but it was easier to showcase. Otherwise I would use my smartphone and then I would have showed the smartphone in camera. So it was just for demo purposes. I used the iCloud. So I would encourage not using any kind of cloud storage on that point.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay, cool. I think that's it. So one more time, big thanks, Martina.
Yeah, thank you all.
And see you around. And we are going on with Rainer Hahnekamp, GDE for Angular, who will talk a bit about change detection in Angular and all the things that will change. Is that right?
That is right. That is right. Exactly. Yeah. So, Manfred, and also to everybody else, sorry for being a little bit too late. Yeah. But I hope you can hear me fine, right?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay.
Can you share your screen? And then
Yes.
we can go on.
Yes. So that's the entire screen that I have to do there.
Yeah, now we have everything here.
Okay.
And yeah, stage is yours.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So welcome to my talk towards modern change detection. I've slightly changed it compared to the agenda, but yeah. So quick introduction of mine. Manfred did it already. So I'm Rainer, part of Angular Architects. So doing consulting workshops in the area of Angular, obviously. And yeah, I maybe want to start my talk with a little bit of a background or with a little bit of a personal connection that I have with change detection. Before I joined Angular Architects, I was working on a web application where we had a very complicated UI, a very challenging one. And once we were finished with it, of course, it was also then tested. And at some point, my boss came to me and he said, something looks to be a little bit weird because whenever I open our website on my smartphone, this was an iPhone, the latest one, it becomes a little bit warm and the battery starts to drain very quickly. So I'm not sure what this is all about. Maybe we can sell it in order to warm the hands during the winter, but that was not the basic idea of it. So we really had a performance issue, a rendering issue in the browser, which we fixed very easily by switching from AngularJS to Angular. And for us, the main performance issue, if you even can say performance issues, have been the bundle size always, and of course also the backend caching, the network requests. And I never thought that I have to deal with change detection anymore. And actually, we never even knew what change detection is all about. It was just working. Well, another question, of course, is why do I actually now give a talk about change detection if it just works? Well, because for some reasons it might not work, especially for performance-specific applications or that have very high demands in terms of performance. But also, you might be a little bit confused by the latest changes that we have, or maybe that you have heard about. Just to give you some 3 terms: hybrid mode, zoneless, signal components, because most of us, we have already existing applications running there. And if we hear change detection is going to change, maybe with signals, it is a little bit strange. And so I want to clarify what we can expect for the future and what you maybe should know about change detection in order to be, and also to keep your code base secure and that everything works bug-free. Good. So we have here the so-called change detection. The change detection is the mechanism that is about how Angular updates or keeps the DOM synchronized with the state that we have in our components. Let's put it like this. So the way how it works, the change detection needs to be triggered by somebody. This comes later. But once it starts, Angular, or maybe first of all, there is of course a change, as we see here on the left side in the yellow color. Then change detection starts, and it starts on the very top of your component tree. And Angular says, okay, I am taking a look at the values which are in the component. I'm comparing them with those which are already in the DOM, the values which are there. And if I see that there is a change in the component, then I'm going to update the DOM, and only for that particular change. So because the change detection doesn't really know if there was actually a change and also not where it was, it needs to go through the component tree, as we see here. So we are going through, then we identify a change, then we apply the update to the DOM, then this is kind of, again, synchronized, and then it needs to also cover the rest of the components as well. So this is what change detection is doing, and once it is through, then it's done, and that's also more or less the default way how it works. Good. So who's now going to trigger it? Well, there are now certain criteria when the change detection is triggered, and the first one is a group of DOM events, but not just DOM events. There is an additional thing. They also need to be handled DOM events. So it's not like if you click somewhere and you don't have an event listener for that then the change detection starts. You need to have an event listener. So you need to have some kind of event binding. Angular needs to be aware of this event listener, and only then would the change detection be triggered. The other thing are asynchronous tasks, ending asynchronous task. So this means if you have an HTTP request and then the response comes back in an asynchronous task, then of course the response is processed synchronously, and after that, again, the change detection is started. And the element at the moment which is responsible for starting or for monitoring all these things is Zone.js. So it knows about the asynchronous tasks. It also knows about the handled DOM events, and then it will trigger the change detection as I've shown it before. Good. Now, one very important thing about the change detection, which I for a very long time didn't even know. The change detection, when it updates the DOM, it really only updates those parts that have to be updated. It is very efficient in that sense. I can give you an example. If you have a DOM element, and inside of this DOM element, only the text has to be updated, and the change detection does not kind of replace the complete DOM element, but it only updates the text property itself. So the DOM element still stays the same. We can see this, for example, in testing, that the DOM element is still the same, but just the text content has changed. So when it comes to access to the DOM, then the change detection, it is already perfect. I mean, what else can you do even better? You are only updating those things which are really necessary, and not like, so there are some kind of stories going around in Angular where they say, well, the change detection re-renders the DOM all the time whenever it runs. That's not the case. This is already perfect. You can't make it any better, and it just works. That's also something which is very good. So I have here an example. We have here our application. The typical one that I always use. And this is a kind of a quiz. And you see here, there is a countdown. There is also a status of the quiz, which shows me which questions I have answered correctly and which one have been answered incorrectly. So we see the countdown just works. I don't need to do anything very special. And if I click then here on some of kind of questions, then it also updates itself. The way how the countdown is implemented is that, first of all, we have here this app status, this quiz component. Let's go to that one first. So we have here all those kind of questions, and we have here this quiz status. That's this subcomponent that my quiz component is using. And the status component says here, well, time left. It's just a normal property, no signal, no observable. And I'm doing here something which we shouldn't do, but just for demonstration purposes, I have here an interval which runs every second, has a subscription where it updates the countdown. So this is the way how the current application works. It just runs fine. I'm happy with it. And of course, we can also measure the change detection. For that, we have the Angular Dev tools, as you see here. I can click on the profiler, and I just need to click on record. And then you see here these bars coming up, which tell me every bar represents a change detection. And it shouldn't be a surprise that they appear every second, because this is an asynchronous task, which is processing. And as I said before, an asynchronous task is a trigger for the change detection. It is as clear as that. Good. So if this is already perfect, what else can we do about it? Well, the connection to the DOM updates, that's perfect. There are still some things that can be improved. There are some issues. First of all, the change detection has to find those changes. So it needs to search for them. And if we have a huge component tree, then it needs to go quite a long way. Would be better if there is a way on how we can kind of minimize or reduce those kind of components. The other problem is that it runs too often. So it could be that, let's say I have an event listener where I click on the button and my event listener just prints out something into the console. So it doesn't do anything in terms of DOM-specific changes, but still change detection needs to run because, again, it doesn't even know if a change has happened there. Now, for a very long time, we only had one possible way on how to improve the change detection. I mean, there are, of course, many. There are tricks, there are libraries like RX Angular and so on and so forth. But the mainstream approach was this kind of excluding components from the check mechanism, from the change detection itself, which, of course, the real term is on push, change detection strategy on push, which means, yeah, in our component tree, we have the possibility to mark certain components, and we can see it like this. We tell the change detection, hey, look, this subtree, this component subtree, which I have here, don't check it unless I am telling you to do so. So again, we have here our component tree. We have the DOM on the right side, and we see here this lock icon. This means that this component is marked as on push, which means if my change detection now starts, it first starts to check the first one, the second one, the third one, then it sees, oh, that's an on push component. It is not marked as dirty, so it's locked in that case. So I'm not going to go into it and check if there is something, if there is a change in there. I'm just going to skip it and only check the last one that is there, and that's it. Then I'm done. Then change detection was successfully, didn't find anything, and that's it. So we could reduce here the amount of components that the change detection needs to go through. That's the key point here. Now, this whole thing, this on push, I see it as a little bit dangerous because we have to know the criteria when those components are marked as dirty, when those components are unlocked. And the internal command for that is mark for check. So those components, they call internally mark for check, which means now they are opening themselves up, which means when the next time the change detection comes around, it will also go into this component tree. So what are the criteria? First, immutable property binding. So I guess most of you know this already. So we need to, when we have input property binding, then we need to provide a new value. It needs to be a new object reference. That's important. Can't be the same one because then it's not immutable. Handle DOM events. That's the same criterion that we also have for triggering the change detection. Please remember that. That would also do Mark4 check. Another one, of course, we can also run it manually. That's not really recommended, but if you're a library author, maybe you need to do it because of performance reasons. We have also the async pipe, which also calls Mark4 check internally. And then we also have, of course, a signal change. So that's these things that we have. And the idea now is that we say, okay, we have now a very click, as you see here at the very bottom, in the component, which is part of this subtree, which is marked on push. The click now changes something in this component. Then, see here the change, the component goes up to the parents, marks all those parents as dirty, which means that it unlocks itself. It opens it up for change detection. Well, and then what's missing? Somebody needs to trigger the change detection because Mark4 check doesn't do it. It just says, yeah, I'm now dirty, but somebody still needs to call the change detection. So this is where Zone.js again comes in. And as a matter of fact, this is a click. So I clicked on the button, which is a handled DOM event. And that also triggers then the change detection via Zone.js. And then the change detection starts, goes through, goes into the on push components, updates it, and then everything is fine. Yeah. And as I said, the risk here is that you miss something or that you do something wrong where Mark4 check does not happen. And as a matter of fact, I have done this. So if I go to my component, then I could say, okay, I want to mark now this component as on push. So I say here change detection on push. I save it. Component re-renders or reloads. And we now see that the countdown does not work anymore. So we could now say, and that's the danger here, well, the change detection is not running. That's not true. So if I click here again on the profiler, we see that the change detection is running internally every second, but it does not update the DOM because I used the wrong kind of mechanisms in an on-push component. I did not, or it was not marked as dirty because I just did here a property assignment to time left, and this is not a criteria to mark this thing for Mark4 check. So what I can do now is that I need to use one of the other tools. Maybe I use an observable. So I would say here, okay, I have here time left. It is an observable, so I'm going to copy now my interval. So put it here. And then I say, okay, this subscribe here, this one, this becomes a map. And I put it now into the pipe. I import the map. And I think I also have to close this part. Close the parentheses. Nope. I'm going to comment this one out. And then, of course, I also need to call here the async pipe, which, as I explained before, is now the part which is calling Mark4 check. So it's the async pipe now, which is here the key, not the rest that I did. It's not just about the observable. It really has to be the async pipe. And if I now go back, then we see, nothing. Did I miss anything? I don't hope so. Doesn't really show up. Let me reload it. So, yeah, no, of course. Maybe I should also return something. It would be nice. I mean, or I should also look at the types. IntelliJ is telling me, do you know that you're actually returning here a void? So I say, okay, my fault. Let's just return here the numbers. And then we will try it again. Well, now it looks a little bit better. Yeah, now so it was as it was before, but now with an on push. And of course, the change detection now runs every second. So this is, as I said, that's the danger that you have to be aware of when you're using on push. You really have to know what kind of things you need to use that call Mark4 check. By the way, I could also say I want to do it the other way around. I say time left as I did it before, which of course will not work, but I could manually, or maybe let's do it a different way because we have it here in below. let me uncomment this part here. And I could, not that I should do it, but I could say I want to have the CDR, the change detector ref, which means now that I can say CDR after this one has been updated, mark for check. Then this is what I'm doing manually, and this is the same thing that also the async pipe would be doing. Yeah. We'll still use the time left. Can go back, and now we see again the countdown is still working. Good. So I've spent now 17 minutes for maybe showing you something which you already know, because this is something which is not new. This has been there for quite many years. And well, what is now changing is that we are now getting incrementally improvements to the change detection itself. One of the changes has been introduced in Angular 17, which is the local change detection, which again comes with some constraints. So the first one is that the local change detection only works when a signal changes. The signal also does do a mark for check, but it does a special mark for check, let's call it like this. The component needs to be on push, that is important. And of course, also the other parent components that I want to exclude from the change detection also needs to be on push. And it doesn't have to have a DOM event. So we are not allowed to trigger the mark for check with a DOM event, which means if I click on the button or if I type something in, then the real mark for check is used because it's also a criterion. It needs to be, in this case, something like an asynchronous task. So that's the only way how you can kind of make use of the local change detection. What is local change detection all about? As the name says, let's just say we have now a component tree where everything is in on push. And I have an asynchronous task. That's important. It needs to be an asynchronous task. That ends. The asynchronous task is then updating a signal, which then also changes something in the component. So then we have here then the dirty marking, but because it is a dirty marking coming via the signal, it does not mark all its parents as dirty. There is just a property in there that says to the change detection, yeah, although the direct component now is marked as clean, so not the dirty marking, but there is one sub-child in this component, which is a dirty marking. Go into it, skip all those parents component, and just check that particular component. So only that one component opens up, not its parents. Because it's an asynchronous task, at the same time also the zone.js is now triggered. And then the change detection says, okay, everything is on push. Everything is not marked as dirty except the last one. So I just go downwards to the last one and only check there. Again, check there does not mean that the DOM change happens. Check there only means I'm just verifying if I have to do a DOM update. Again, does not mean that I will probably render something. Sure. And this is something we can do. We just need to use a signal and need to update the signal in our case. Then we have local change detection. And as a matter of fact, that's also why I'm using here, of course, an interval, an asynchronous task, because that's the only way how you can do it. So what do I have to do? Well, let's just say we have here a time left. This is now our signal, 180. I, of course, also need to call it like this. And then I say here, maybe I also put in a console log for running. We will require it later. And then I just say set. So this should do it. Set the time left. And we can again go back and we can verify if the application is still running. Wonderful. There we are. It is running, but how can we find now out if it only updates the status part and not everything again? So not updating how can we verify that the change detection only runs in the quiz status component, but not in the parent component? There is a trick that I can do. I can put into my parent component here this last rendering. So what is this doing is that it just shows the current time here with a now. And the now is just a function call, which means it just returns you the current date. Let me go downwards. So here we have the current date. And for me, it is an indicator, if I see that this now here is changing all the time, that it is also checked, which is not something that I want, because then I have the normal change detection and I want to have the local one. Only that this one, the quiz status internally is checked. So I can go back. We see it's not good. The time's here running, which means, again, the parent is checked. But the reason is that this component that I have here is not marked as on push. And this is what I said before. The local change detection really works if all those components have their on push change detection strategy. So I say here again, change detection on push, save it, and then I go back. Application loads. Yeah, we see the countdown works, but the last rendering does not work, except I click on some of those answers here, because of course then I have an event inside of the quiz component, and then the change detection just runs normally, because that's a normal handler DOM event. So this is local change detection, very performant already. So we can really kind of narrow it down. We can say change detection, please only go to that particular component because there was a change. And I can now notify, I can do this now with a signal. So the thought or the kind of next step would now be obvious, that we say, hey, what if we just do everything in signals, which is in a way kind of the basic idea, and let's just rearrange the signal a little bit, that we say the signal cannot trigger the change detection, because if everything is a signal, then it's very easy. And that was actually one of the original plan, as far as I know, when signals were introduced, that the Angular team wanted to bring in the signal components as quickly as possible, because the signal component would have actually been exactly like that. Like no Zone.js, only a signal, and that one triggers the change detection, very specific on that particular component. The problem now, we might be in a situation where we could rewrite our application code that everything is using signals, although I doubt that for very large applications. But nevertheless, you still have a lot of libraries that will definitely not be able to do the jump or to do the switch to signals that easily. So we need to come up with something intermediate. We need to come up with an intermediate solution that kind of allows us, to kind of prepare ourselves for this very fine-grained, centered change detection. And that's more or less what we also will now get in Angular 18, at least that's my interpretation, which will kind of focus on the problem that the change detection also runs, even if it's not necessary, even if we didn't do any change. And this is the zoneless approach, which will now work together with the so-called, with the normal, so we can use zone and the new addition that we have. And if you use zone with the new addition, it's called hybrid mode. But if you say you're disabling zone and you only use the new version, the new mode, then it's just zoneless. So what's the zoneless all about? Well, if we say, okay, we can't move everything to signals in order to trigger now the change detection, we need to find another trigger. And in a way, we have it already, because mark for check can also do it. I mean, mark for check is something which has been there for many years. Quite a lot of applications which are using on push are relying on it. And in a way, you could say those applications that are already using on push, they use mark for check. And if now they are going to remove Zone.js and mark for check would trigger the change detection, it shouldn't be any problem. They should just work out of the box. And this is exactly what this new thing now introduces, that mark for check additionally next to Zone.js, which you could also now include in Angular 18, don't need to remove it, is now triggering the change detection. So we have Zone.js and we also have now mark for check. Okay. And I'm not going to use the hybrid mode. I just go directly zoneless. So this means Zone.js, we can forget it. It's not there anymore, which means the triggers for asynchronous tasks and handle DOM events don't count anymore. And well, if I have then somewhere a change in my component, I have to make sure that I'm using something which also counted already in the on-push strategy as a valid action, namely mark for check in this case. So again, async pipe, immutable property binding, all these things which I have shown before, these are all calling mark for check. And if you make sure that this is going to work also with on push, then you're on the safe side, and it is very likely that you can disable Zone.js and your application will just work just better. And there I have a use case for it. So here we have this mark for check, which is called mark for check is then triggering Zone.js. It's not triggering Zone.js, it's triggering the change detection. And then in this case, the rules apply because I don't have here an on push. So in this case, all is of course checked. But of course, I could also then say, okay, I use on push everywhere. And then I could have the local change detection or whatever. The point is, there is no Zone.js anymore. So what do I have to do? Well, I need to go first of all in my app configuration. And by the way, I'm running here already on Angular 18.6, so not 18.6, but the pre-release. And yeah, I say I want to use the experimental zoneless change detection. The name says it all. It's experimental. And now I can go back to my component or let's go back to the web application and see if it's still working. Which it should. Yeah, it's there. So countdown is running. Yeah, local change detection works just fine. But now let's do a change. Let's do a change which would not have been possible with the normal change detection, or which wouldn't have this kind of performance benefit. Because what I'm saying now, I don't want to update the time left all the time. I just want to update it after 5 seconds have been gone. So every 5 seconds, I want to update the time left. And I am, what do I do? I would say here, I have here now this new time, const new time equals, because I'm not sure if I really want to put it into the signal. And then I have here my if condition, where I say, okay, f new time, modulo 5, if that is 0, then, and only then, do I want to update my time left? So I want to say here, that's now the new time. Good. Of course, set. Let's wait. One thing I want to show you before, let's quickly go back to the normal change detection, just to see just to see the difference that we get now. The thing should work normally, but yeah, we have here running. Now it jumps to 170. So the thing is obviously working. 165. So every 5 seconds, as I said. But the problem is that we now, if we look at the profiler, that the profiler is now running the change detection every second. So we have 5 runs where nothing happens. It's just useless. And we have 1 run where really a change is there. And this is because I'm using here asynchronous tasks, which is a trigger according to the Zone.js. And if I now say no Zone.js, please, I have my mark for check in place. The signal will do it now for me. Whenever I set a new value, then I can reload it. And again, I can go to my profiler. Now I can say, okay, I want to see what's happening now. We see, first of all, here the 175 seconds are there. We see 1 change detection run, which changed now to 170. And we have another one after every 5 seconds. So that's the performance gain, which you have now, and which also actually makes sense. Because again, the change detection does not run, or only runs when it's really necessary. It's also here local change detection, because it's still a signal. We see here also that this last rendering does not update itself. But theoretically, you could also say, well, let's just do here a normal property assignment. Let's just also say here, I'm assigning here my time left without a signal. That is also possible, because again, we can also do zoneless without signals. That's not really a problem. It just is a little bit more complicated. And I say, well, if the time left is now, if 5 seconds have gone by, then I want to mark for check myself. But what I'm doing here is that I'm also call the change detection. That is something which I do here. I'm going to remove the time left again. I'm going to store it, save it. I go back. We will see if this now changes again. Yeah, changes. I go to my profiler just to verify change detection is not running. Only if it's necessary, as I said. No, yeah, no, it's there and not the rest. And by the way, this is now not local change detection anymore, because you see here with every update, also the timer updates. So the same rules that we had before, even with local change detection, which is a very new feature, also apply now to the upcoming experimental zoneless world. Yeah. And that's what we will have very soon available, experimental. And in the future, we don't know when. We also don't know exactly the real details. So some of it might be a little bit speculative or speculation, signal components, which used to be actually the original idea. But now we have this kind of intermediate step, as I said before, which also works without signals. They will definitely have this kind of on-push behavior built in. I would say they would be zone free. So even if Zone.js is there, it will not apply to the signal components. I would find this logically. We will have this kind of fine-grained change detection, which means that even if we have a very large component, that there are some certain things in place. So the fuse, where the change detection would say, I'm only checking parts of my, or only a subset of my component, but not all of it. And then, as I said, this is speculation. We've heard that the NGF, the NG4, the NG switch, they have been replaced with the new template blocks because they will not run without Zone.js signal components. And I would think that signal components are also standalone. I mean, to me, it would make sense. But in the end, this would then be this kind of component type, which would provide local change detection because everything's on push, the fine-grained change detection, and of course, only the signal would then trigger the change detection and not the rest anymore. So here again, last slide, at least about the change detections. When a signal changes in a signal component, then the fine-grained change detection will only cover parts of this component, only check parts of this component, not everything. And yeah, that's it. So in general, if you wanna now say, as I said it in the very beginning, it just works. I didn't have to change anything. I didn't even know what change detection is all about. The best thing what you can do is that you just use signals right away. Then you are on the very safe side. If you can't, but if you still want to go zoneless, then at least you need to have this know-how that you required already before when you used on push, because it's the same thing. Again, mark for check will not trigger the change detection. I actually planned that this talk lasts 20 minutes. Now I doubled already. Yeah, for further reading, there are these three guys. I think maybe they're even in the chat. We have Mathieu Riegler. This first article is more or less what you have seen here. So this is actually the talk to this article. Mathieu writes not that often as the other two, but he writes in a very compact way, and he has also insider information, let's call it like this. Then we have Inea and Yevgeny. They also they blog on a very regular basis, always very deep dive topics, especially if you care, if you want to know more about change detection, then definitely check them out as well. And last but not least, I have also created some videos. So I have one video about change detection and another one for signals. So if you're interested in that, would also recommend it, although the signals video is a little bit longer, more than 1.5 hours, but I hope it's worth it. And by that, thanks for watching, and I'm done.
Thank you, Rainer. This was really nice.
Thanks.
I really like the didactics. First of all, the didactics with the lock. I really like it, with the open lock and the closed lock. And then also the didactics about playing around with it and doing little tiny experiments. So
yeah, thanks. I also hope that you could see some kind of an evolution of the change detection, and also a little bit of an explanation why it is like this. So as I said, there are some issues. but step by step, it became even better. And what we also see, what I also want to highlight again, we see that the Angular team really tries very hard that they introduce those changes without even that we even don't have to care about it. Because if we have an on push, we don't need to do anything, just disable Zone.js, and it just works.
Yeah, I always like it if someone else does my work. So I'm very grateful that the Angular team takes care of this. Cool. So we have a first question here from Daval. Do you recommend using ignore changes outside of zone when using V18 with zone? Mainly because if we not ignore, there will be additional runs triggered apart from zone, as it's the same AP.
Yeah. So this is actually a breaking change. I didn't say anything about it, but you will have in 18 the possibility that you say a signal change or a mark for check would also actually work outside of Zone.js. I don't know. I mean, honestly speaking, I would be happy if everything would be covered if everything would trigger the change detection. Yeah, we will see. I mean, there are some use cases actually where I'm currently having some issues where things are running outside of Zone.js, which require me to trigger now the change detection manually, which is something I don't need if I leave it with the default values. But if you say, I would say you have a library again, and you have very specific use cases, you are very kind of downwards to the performance issues, then yeah, it might be an option. But yeah, just try it out if it really hurts your application or not.
Cool.
Yeah, and Enea also said already, yeah, maybe not. So
cool. Mathieu is adding that this all can be helpful when some tests are CD dependent.
yes, I mean, I think in general, the testing story is a completely different topic. We still have wait for async, we have fake async, which heavily depend on the existence of Zone.js. So I'm very curious what the future will be about it. I know that there are some issues on the Angular project which have to deal with also testing, but I think the work hasn't officially started yet. So maybe internally, but to the outside, I haven't heard anything about it.
Cool. So are there any further questions? Take your chance.
Yeah, I hope that since Mathieu, Enea, and I think also Evgenia are already here, I hope they have already answered everything which has been shown up in the meantime.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, Rainer, big thanks. It was
Thanks
really
as
a
well.
pleasure. And we are going on with Alex, who will talk about accessibility. Is that right?
Yes, sure.
Cool. So please share your screen.
Yes.
And here we go. Stage is yours.
Thanks, Manfred, Martina, and Rainer for the interesting talks. Yeah, I will talk about accessibility. I will try to catch up some time since it's already late, and I will really try to focus on the essence on this topic in combination with Angular. So what do we need to take care of in our Angular apps for the topic of accessibility? Is that what I will talk about? Yeah. I'm Alex. My name is Alex T. And I posted the link on how to contact me into the chat already. So if you want to contact me, just look at that page. And I want to start with the question what accessibility actually means. And I know I shouldn't put so much text on the screen, but I just did it copied from Wikipedia. And the important thing is the concept of accessible websites should be able to directly access and indirect access, meaning compatibility with the person's assistive technology. So this is the original definition of accessibility. But when we talk about accessibility, we mean much more than that. There's a image by Microsoft, and it shows a lot of possible users that need accessibility. So you can have you can be injured and have one arm, but on the other hand, you can also be a parent also with just one arm at that moment, and you can be blind or you can be distracted by something else where you need screen readers, and you can be deaf, or you can just be a bartender that wants to use our application but isn't able to hear it if you play an audio file or a video, for example. So it reaches a lot of people, and not only those people with disabilities. That's just a motivation I want to share why we want to do accessibility optimization. And of course, one legal update that will be put into legal next year. And so this was the introduction. What we talk about is little agenda is this legal update, then some tools we can use to improve the accessibility of our application, and also how we can do manual accessibility testing. And finally, some best practices, some general best practices that I recommend, and some best practices, especially in Angular applications. So yeah, let's start with the legal update. This is very easy, digestible, so no more technical stuff from my side. We have this European Union directive from April 2019, so already 5 years ago, which is called in German Europäisches Gesetz zur Barrierefreiheit, or in English, European Accessibility Act. And it's basically a regulation for the accessible use of certain products and services. And some of them are named here: computers, mobile phones, ticket machines, payment terminals, ebooks, and this is especially interesting for some developers, also for e-commerce. So everything that falls under the general e-commerce will be affected by this EAA, which will be a rule in Europe starting from next year. So I have some. We have each country has to put this law into their own law, and there you can see. Just want to quickly show that this law is basically the same in every country. There are some minor distinguishing between Germany and Austria. For example, if you have existing e-commerce services, you have 5 to 15 years from migration of these existing services in Germany. And in Austria, since we are a bit slower or a bit more lazy, we have 5 more years to migrate our services. But basically, as you can see, there's almost no difference. Also, the name is different. In Germany, it says enforcing accessibility law, and in Austria, it's just basically accessibility law. So that's about the legal update. Starting from June 28th next year, all new products need to apply to these accessibility rules, which I will show you in a minute. But for existing products, we still have some time to migrate. That's good to know. Yeah, next I want to show you some basic accessibility tools which we can use to test our Angular apps. And yeah, there are a lot of tools. As you might expect, we can use the Angular linter, the ESLint Angular plugin, which is something I like a lot because it's already there and it's already focusing on Angular. And then, of course, we can use a lot of testing tools. I've just named a few here. So there are a lot of Chrome extensions like Lighthouse and Wave. Those two I want to show you as well. And of course, we have JavaScript, the Xcore plugin that runs on JavaScript. And we have some add-ons for Jest and Storybook and so on. So there are a lot of tools out there. Yeah, also a lot of screen readers. So if you want to get an impression what the website would here, like when you use a screen reader, then you can use one of those. Make sure to try that out if you want to know how accessible your website currently is. So I'm sure you'll be surprised how difficult it is to navigate most of the websites today without seeing the content. Then there are some other tools. Yeah, would I just like to mention them. And now let me give you one little demo about these tools, since I don't want to only talk. Yeah, I only want to also want to show you something. So for the Angular ESLint plugin, I think it's really a great help when you develop. It has a lot of features. Like, for example, you can expect the new control flow syntax with Angular 17, or else throw a warning. You can also do a lot of performance optimization linting, which are included here, like ng source. Always use ng source, and so on and so forth. But the relevant one for accessibility is, of course, this accessibility template, which includes all the accessibility rules with this one plugin. So this is typically already added if you install ESLint starting from Angular 17. But when you're using older versions, or when you have added ESLint to your Angular app before Angular 17, then it's not there. So you have to manually basically add this after the recommended comma and then put it here. And then you can already use it. That's all you have to do. So showing you an example here, type nglint or nxlint if you use nx. And then it gives you already the feedback. And just a few examples in my example project, which I use for the accessibility workshop that I do with the Angular architects. And you can, of course, then see this is a pretty well-known accessibility rule. I'm sure you all have heard of that one. You should associate a label with form element. And as you can see, I didn't associate the label to the form element. So what we do here, of course, is add a from, a for, from, and maybe here the ID equals from. And that's one quick improvement to our accessibility. And if I do the linting again, I should have 4 problems now. Yeah. And then we have some other lint errors, like, for example, we are missing an alt text here and also in the sidebar. So we should also fix that. So we find some errors with the ESLint, and I like it a lot because it's already showing up pretty quickly, and you can very easily integrate it and just use it. Yeah, so that's that. Another tool I want to show you is a tool I've been using for many, many years, and it's called Lighthouse. I'm sure all of you know it, or I hope. And of course, it can be used to test the performance of any application or website you're running in the browser. So also you can also use localhost with your Angular app, and then you can select the categories starting from performance, which was the first category you can use. But of course, in this talk, we talk about accessibility, so make sure to check that. And then you can just hit analyze, and it will check the current page. So not the whole Angular application, but only the current tab, the current view, or let's say the current smart component, the current feature. And you get a lot of interesting feedback there, even more than from the Angular ESLint accessibility template. And you can then, of course, also see what the problem is. It shows you the item. So this is probably the navbar toggle or the sidebar toggle. And it obviously doesn't have a discernible name. And then you can, get some more information from the Google developer pages, how to fix that, or if you already have worked a little bit with accessibility, it's pretty easy to know what to do. So again, this link doesn't have a discernible name. And of course, we also get this form element error. And some more like background and foreground colors don't have a sufficient contrast ratio, or links rely on color to be distinguishable. Yeah, so it's really very straightforward and easy to use. And I think if you use these two tools, you're on a good way, on a good track to have a good accessibility. But of course, there are some more tools. And there's one last that I'd like to show you before going to the next part with the best practices. And this is the Wave Chrome extension. So Web Accessibility Evaluation Tool really focuses on accessibility compared to the Lighthouse tool, which also includes accessibility, but this tool is really focused around the topic, and I think it's a little more advanced. And it also has a lot of tests. So you can see also some same errors here, but also some more. We have an empty button there. So it again doesn't have any text in it. And then it's, as you can see, there are a lot of hints on what you can improve to improve the accessibility. And I really recommend using those tools and start thinking about and improving your accessibility today, and not once it's legally required, because all your users or many users can benefit from these optimizations. And of course, on the other hand, also bots. If you think about search engines or AI, maybe it will be much easier for those bots to understand and interpret your website. So it's generally a good idea to use these accessibility best practices and to use those tools. So let's go back to my presentation. Are those tools good enough? Of course, no. So it's still necessary to do manual testing. Maybe that's the biggest takeaway about the tools. We can use them, they help us, but we still need to do some manual testing if you really want to apply to the web accessibility guidelines. And then let's talk about these web content accessibility guidelines a bit. So the current version is 2.2, and this is also the version that will be kind of connected to the European Accessibility Act. So if you want to implement the law correctly, you also need to learn a bit about these accessibility guidelines. And I will just give you a super quick introduction and overview about these guidelines. So it has 4 principles. Every web content should be perceivable for every person. It should be operable for every person. It should be understandable, and it should be robust. So the latter is focused on, it should work on every device. It should be responsive, of course. And the second last one is it should be understandable for all kind of people. So these are the 4 principles, and then there are the 4 levels of conformity. A, AA, and AAA. So if you have ever heard about these stock rating companies, they have the same ratings basically. So A is a minimum level here. AA is addressing on some common and issues and a wider range of users, and AAA is like perfect, providing a most comprehensive accessibility. So today, most websites or most web apps and Angular apps probably won't even make an A grade. So it's our mission to improve that and to become more accessible for all kind of people, and of course also for bots. The EU standards, if we talk about the European Accessibility Act, then by the way, it requires an AA level of conformity. So that's already pretty much, I would say, There's pretty much work to do. So better if you start working on it today. Yeah, that's my recommendation in general. And when we want to know all the specific guidelines, we can look at this quick reference. This is one last thing I want to show you. Yeah, so we have these 4 principles on the left in the navigation. So perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And then for each of these 4 principles, we have a list of guidelines. So the first one, non-text content. This is what everybody knows for I don't know how many years. We need a text alternative for our images so that the images can be interpreted also by people who cannot or are not able to see. And yeah, also for, as you might know, for search engines, this is very important. And then we have a lot of rules, and I don't want to go over them because, yeah, we don't want to spend a week, right? But yeah, so let's go back to the to my personal recommendations, or I like to call them LXT's 10 commandments, or maybe let's just say best practices. All these rules relevant? Well, yes, but we need to start somewhere. Yeah, exactly. So this is the list of 10 best practices I would recommend to apply today. So first of all, use semantic HTML and have a structured HTML. That means use the proper HTML tags, use button tag for button and not something else, and use a table tag for a table, and so on and so forth. Input for input, label for label, you know what I'm talking about. Then make sure your Angular app is navigable with the keyboard. So yeah, there are some other input devices besides mouse and keyboard or touchpad and keyboard, but generally, if you can navigate with the keyboard, then those other devices will also work. So just make sure your app is navigable with the keyboard. Make sure to have text alternatives for your images, and also text alternatives or descriptions for your media, meaning videos or audio files. Make sure that you can that you have some descriptions for those for that media, or some live captions as well. Tables should have header and footer. The header and the footer should always be visible when you show a table in your app. And also, again, like with text alts and media, also tables should have some kind of a summary or description on it. And for the forms, there are various requirements of what you should do. You should make the form accessible by allowing keyboard navigation, of course, but also by using area tags. I don't want to go into detail with area, but you should use area tags to show the state of the form, to highlight errors of input fields, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot to do, like associating labels and so on. And for the font size, there's one basic rule. Support the default font size of your devices, of the browser, of the machine, of the smartphone, whatever is using your Angular application. And you can do this by using font size 100% in your HTML as a CSS rule, and then from there on using REM as font sizes. But don't go too small. You shouldn't go below like 90% of this 100%. So maybe the smallest font size, if you use 16 pixel, for example, should be 14 pixel. But of course, if some user with bad sight uses 24 pixel for his device, then it will be like maybe 22 and not less. Take care of the tab targets. Tab targets shouldn't be too small. I always think on my grandmother when she is tapping something on her smartphone. She really has difficulties hitting those targets, or yeah, you know what I mean. And of course, color and contrast is also very important. If you have, for example, if you're using the device under sunlight, you might have experienced some difficulties with some apps if you don't have enough contrast. You cannot use them, and the same is true for color. If you have bad sight or also bad lighting, then you want to be able to distinguish those colors. So for example, it's a good idea to use the underscore for links and not to show it only when you hover the link. And last but not least is about language. You should be using an easy language, understandable language, and not a complicated language like some people, some scientific people in German-speaking countries think it's a good idea to use, but actually it's not. And people should understand the content. Yeah, no matter what their mother tongue is, or no matter how the education is, and so on and so forth. So also a very important best practice. Yeah, and one example is semantic HTML. I'm sure you all know that. You should use the proper text. So last part of my talk will be a little focus on Angular, since we are all here for Angular and showing a love to Angular. And of course, we can use the router very easily to add some page titles to each route. So the title of the application should change when you route your application. And then also, for example, the browser tab on the top of your browser will show the title of the current route. It's very easy to use that feature. Just add a title in your routes. Or if you want to have a dynamic title, you can just inject the title from the Angular core. Also show what link is currently active. So you can use the area current when active input when you also use the router link active input, for example, in a sidebar or in the main navigation to highlight the current link with area current. So if you just use the color to highlight it, then maybe people won't be able to see that, of course. And one last thing I like to recommend is focus management. So you can hook into the navigation end event from the ng router to focus on your main content area with just a few lines, like in this example, and then the user is already the user focus will already put into the right direction on your application. Of course, we could talk a lot about ng area attributes and roles. But yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail because you can do a lot of stuff. If you go to this URL, you can see there is a lot of area tags. I wouldn't know where to start. Yeah, make sure you use them. And if you use them in Angular and you want to bind something dynamically into it, then you need the attribute prefix. You don't need the attribute prefix everywhere, but especially in area tags, you have to use it to make the things working correctly. So if you want to bind, let's say, a component member called my action label to the area label attribute, then you have to use the attribute.prefix. If you just have a close button, then of course you don't need that. You can just use the native HTML attribute, and that's good enough for those static cases. But for dynamic usage, use the attribute prefix. And two last recommendations, especially for Angular. If you use Angular material, it's a good best practice collection of accessibility. All the components in Angular material take care of accessibility. So it's a good best practice. If you build your own design system, make sure that you look into what they are doing. Also, maybe look into some other design systems like ng-Zoro or PrimeNG, or maybe Canopy, just to name a few, or Clarity. So if you build your own design system, make sure you copy what they are doing, basically. Yeah. So like, for example, using the proper HTML tags, like button for a button, and not creating an own selector for your button, but instead using an attribute selector. That's quite a good idea, actually. And another thing you can use is the component development kit by Angular, which has a own accessibility package that provide a lot of tools for your own components. You can check out this accessibility guide. Basically, it has a focus trap where you can trap the focus to a dialog. And it also has a very interesting live announcer that can announce messages. For example, if you want the user want to show an error message to the user, like the user did some save action or search action, and for example, the API was not reachable, and of course you can show him an error or her in the browser, but using the live announcer will also make this kind of visible to people that cannot see anything. Okay, so very good, very easy to use this live announcer. If you're like me and you like logging errors or messages to the console, then you can take that error message or log message one-to-one and replace the console log with the live announcer, and then you're good to go. Basically, it's as easy as that. Yeah. The other one is the trap focus. If you, for example, if you have a GDPR pop-up or modal, and then you want to trap the focus into this modal so that the user can easily click on close and not get lost in the other navigation of the application, for example. Okay, that's it. From my side, the conclusions. Yeah, be prepared for the legal changes. Start thinking about accessibility today and not maybe in next June. Use the accessibility tools that I showed you. I like those best, but of course there are plenty of tools out there. Check the web content accessibility guidelines, the current version 2.2, and the quick ref for details for each rules. If you really want to deep dive into accessibility, and yeah, apply those accessibility best practices in Angular that I've just shown you. And then I think you're well prepared for all that's coming up. And also, yeah, you enhance the user experience for a lot of users of your application, and of course also for bots and AI, which is also which will be more important, of course, in the future. All right, that's all. Check out my workshop, which I do at the Angular Architects. If you want to deep dive into this topic, it's just a one-day workshop. Or if you want to practice accessibility, check out this code labs, which is developed by Emma Tversky from the Angular team. I think it's really cool. Oops. There is the recursion again. Yes, that's it.
Awesome. Yeah, big thanks, Alex. That was really a nice presentation of a quite important topic and an underrated topic, I would say.
Yes, I agree. But yeah, let's see what the future will bring.
Yeah, if the new laws can help here a bit. At least they should, I guess. Yeah, I don't think there are a lot of questions in the chat. So if you have any questions, feel free to add them now. There are some comments. For instance, Oz is saying, by making your apps accessible, you increase your audience by approximately 15%. And in terms of money, it might be quite a noticeable amount. About 15% of users have disabilities according to WHO.
Yeah. So the same number is true for Germany, for example. About 15% of users have some kind of disabilities, but even more users are affected by good accessibility. Like I showed you, maybe parents, maybe people that are in a workplace where it's very loud. so you can reach a lot of people with improving your accessibility today.
Cool. Okay, yeah, some people are saying thank you. So there is a lot of awesome feedback. Thank you. And a longer thank you. Yeah, cool. So I also say thanks to all our speakers from today. It was really amazing to host you all. And thanks for joining us. And yeah, see you around. Bye-bye.
Great, Pastor. Ciao.